Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Prime Pediatric Podcast. This is your host, Dr. Skip Weiss, and I am super excited today. I have the fortunate event of interviewing a very, very close friend of mine, Dr. Stephanie Wigner. Dr. Stephanie, how are you doing today? How has everything been going?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh, I'm excited to have you on. I am super excited. I know you've been in practice 5 years, going on 6. Can you introduce yourself a little bit to our audience here at the Prime Pediatric Podcast and just let us know who you are, what you're about, where you practice?
Sure. So I'm Dr. Stephanie Wigner. I practice in New Jersey at the Jersey Shore. We have 2 locations. We are certified pediatric prenatal chiropractors through the ICPA. And I'm also a business coach. So I tend to coach a lot of chiropractors through the beginning stages of opening their practice. So I feel like I have a lot of experience that kind of ranges from doing it myself to coaching others to do it as well. Um, and yeah, so I am originally from Kansas. People are always so surprised to hear that, but I met my husband at chiropractic school in Palmer. We were in the same tri, and so he's originally a Jersey boy. And then when we were thinking about what did we want to do after school, I wanted to get out of the Midwest. He was like, I miss living by the beach, so we came out to Jersey. We both associated for a year, and I worked in an extremely busy pediatric prenatal focused practice, but it just wasn't the experience that I was looking for. And so I thought, you know what, I really love serving this clientele, but I kind of want to do it the way that I want to do it. And so I decided that I wanted to live closer to the beach because at that time we were up in North Jersey. And so that's how it started. I went and I opened my first practice. I had already completed most of my program while I was in school through the ICPA. And so during my first year of the associateship, I was able to get the research portion done. So then when I was opening my practice, I was also studying for the exam to take that. And so it was a hectic time trying to figure that all out, and then also studying for the exam, but we made it happen. And then so I opened in May of 2016, and then in August of 2017, I opened my satellite clinic, which is about 20 miles away from where my first clinic was. And I ran both of those by myself, seeing patients out of both locations, just me and one CA, for 2 years until my associate, Dr. Monica, joined us.
That's awesome. Wow. Dr. Stephanie, that's impressive. I mean, to be 1 year out of school, actually 2 years, if you consider 1 year out of an associate, 1 year on your own, and then opening up your next practice, which is phenomenal. There's a lot of docs that don't even have a second practice or an associate 15, 20 years into practice. And I think that's amazing. Real quickly, I know that you do a lot with coaching. I know that you do a lot of work with other docs. How can my doctors get a hold of you? How do they find you right off the bat here?
So I'm most easily accessible on Instagram. That's where I tend to hang out the most. So I'm Dr. Steph Wigner on Instagram. My consulting page is the Abundant Living Co. And then obviously our office is Circle of Life Cairo. So I'm kind of hanging out on those 3 pages.
Well, you heard it. So you guys got to go out and find her because she's phenomenal. Now, let's talk a little bit about your first couple of years out, because you went from associateship to super success. You don't just open up your second practice because your first practice is failing. You have to be doing really, really well at your first practice. What's that?
Or you're a little crazy.
Probably both. You live in Jersey, which is crazy because you moved from the Midwest, Jersey. But I know that you and your husband actually, typically people don't quite get this, but you guys don't actually practice together. When you guys first opened up, you had 2 separate practices. Can you talk a little bit about that and why you made that decision?
Yeah, so I feel like only chiropractic nerds would understand this, but when Kyle and I were dating in school, we actually got into quite a few arguments over technique and philosophy. And so he is very rehab centered. He does integrative diagnosis. He does active release technique. And so he has all these tools in his tool belt to help people get out of pain. And I would be like, okay, but you can't make a baby poop. Like, I don't care what ART does. You can't make a baby poop or help them poop, right? And he was like, so we just got into arguments, and it was early on that we realized we're both right. We both have our unique skill set and unique passions. And instead of following what most chiropractic couples do and opening up together, we should just run our own ships and each pursue our own passions, which definitely worked out the best for us. I even have some clients sometimes that I'm like, oh, maybe you should work separately. Because you would be able to speak to it, but I think that sometimes it can be difficult working with your spouse, and it takes a unique couple to be able to do that. And frankly, Kyle and I are both pretty headstrong, and so we just do better. We have other businesses together that work out great. That, you know, we do real estate together. We do a couple online things together that work out wonderfully. But just working together in the chiropractic sphere didn't make sense for us, and so we both got associateships when we moved to Jersey, and I learned early on that my associateship wasn't for me. So we planned for me to open my office first. Kyle was in an associateship that he was really happy at. They took really good care of him. And so his plan was to stay there while I built up my practice. And so when my practice got to where it could cover our personal bills, it was covering its own overhead. My first practice, we were profitable by month 2. So that was my huge, I didn't do the traditional get a beautiful storefront. I didn't have all the fancy equipment. I really was doing bare bones. I actually opened my first practice up all on credit cards. Not that I think that that is the right decision for everybody, but I had tried to get a loan, but because of student loan debt, because I didn't have any collateral, because I didn't have a co-signer on the loan, I couldn't even get approved for a $30,000 loan.
I know.
And so the only option was like, okay, well, I can either let this be a moment that this stops me, or I could figure out a way to make this happen regardless of who's telling me no. And so that's what I did essentially. And so I knew with opening on credit cards, I needed to become profitable because you can't pay your rent on a credit card.
Nope.
There's other ways that you have to pay some bills that can't go on a credit card. And so luckily, by, you know, the grace of God and by hard work and determination, we were profitable really quickly. And then once my practice got to a place that was sustainable, and then I could cover our personal overhead as well as the practice overhead, Kyle then left his associateship because he had just reached a place where there was no more room for growth, and he went out and opened his own. And so that's what I think is important for younger couples coming out of school also to realize. If you both have a desire to do something, it doesn't have to be together. It's okay if it is, but it's also okay if it's not. And then also it's almost like that give and take. I don't like to say sacrifice because neither one of us sacrificed anything. We both got what we wanted. It was just on a different timeline. We had to kind of play Tetris a little bit with how that was going to work.
Well, I think the sacrifice isn't really the truth, as it is just being amicable to each other and understanding quickly that maybe you just don't mesh working together in that situation. My wife and I, Julie, we opened up our practice right away together, but there's a lot of give and take in those roles. Like it's a big thing. When you open a practice with your spouse, it's not easy. There's a lot of discussions. I think one of the biggest things spouses need to understand in chiropractic, whether you own your own practice or not, let's say you're both associating, you need to become really comfortable talking about money, and you need to become really comfortable talking about finances, because if you're not, you can start a fight. One can be held liable. Like you can start placing blame when really it's together, and you need to be in it together. And both couples' success hinge on that. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I agree. And I also think that, you know, even just mentioning the finances, it's not necessarily easy to open 2 separate practices either, because we have 2 separate overheads in addition to our home overhead, right?
Yep.
And so there's a lot of income that has to be coming in to cover all of those things. But for us, it just made sense. But for us to be separate, but there's so many couples who get it right working together. And it was just I think if one of us was like, oh, I really want to make this work, then we would have did it, and it would have been a success, because that's just our personality. We would have figured it out, what works. But both of us were like, yeah, this kind of feels good for us to be doing our own thing. He doesn't want to see pediatrics, and I don't want to see people in chronic pain.
And I think that's amazing. I really do. And I applaud you for understanding that. And you and Kyle both knowing your limitations and like how to work together really, really well. Because you have other businesses you work on together too, which I know a lot about. And that's what makes you guys kind of a superpower couple, and to be able to understand each other's strengths and work with each other. Now, you are also a new mama, and your baby is gorgeous.
Oh,
and
thank you.
We've had numerous conversations about you being the person that it doesn't have the baby, but is still trying to take care of pregnant moms, still trying to take care of the newborns. And how did you bridge the gap, Dr. Steph, in keeping that authority, keeping that confidence up when you didn't have a baby of your own, you didn't experience pregnancy quite yet, but you were really successful in practice? What did you do?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question. It was intimidating. I'm not gonna lie. You know, I was moving to a place in the town that I opened. There's like 5 chiropractors on the same street. Some of them say that they do pediatrics and pregnancy. Some of them say that they're family wellness, you know? And so I was stepping into this territory where it was like, okay, if we're going to view that as competition, I'm really low man on the totem pole. I don't have children. I'm not going to be going to all of these mom events.
Mhm.
I wasn't married yet when I opened the practice, but I'm not from Jersey, so I don't even have friends that are just going to bring me their kids because they're like, "Oh, Steph opened up, let's go to her." Like I was completely out of my element.
Mhm.
It was terrifying. It was definitely something that I don't think is for the faint of heart. You know, it took a lot of pep talks for myself, like, "Okay, you can do this. It's going to work." But I think that it also gave me a unique perspective because it allowed me to be completely honest, now that I do have my baby, it's really hard to see where other people are coming from because I have so much of my own stuff going on, right?
Mhm.
It's like I want to be reasonable and I totally understand and I want to work around your schedule, but even for us to hop on this podcast between our two schedules, it took us a couple weeks to be able to figure something out that worked, you know? And so
Yeah.
by being a mom, I have those other obligations that are taking up my time. Whereas when I wasn't a mom, and I didn't have that. I definitely had more time on my hands than the average new mom does. And so it allowed me to cultivate some of those relationships with other people in the community because I could meet them where they were at. I could meet them literally at their place of business. I could meet them on a time that worked for them because I would clear out everything to make that happen. And it just allowed me to be super available, which you aren't necessarily when you have children. And so when I opened my practice, I reached out to lots of local providers, but also just other business owners. I wanted to get to know as many people in the community as I could. Also, I came from a place of like, hey, I'm new here. Who do I need to know? Who do I need to be friends with? Like, where are the best restaurants? You know, it was like all just gathering intel all the time, and realizing like, oh, okay, all these types of people like me, like this this particular school. How can I connect with that school? And really, I came into it with like, hey, eventually I'm going to have children. I want to know the best providers for myself. And
Mhm.
if I could start making connections with them now, what better way than to have my patients in the future go to them as well?
I think that's great. It's such a learning experience for you because you basically force yourself into that mom role without having the baby, meaning that you were interviewing all the providers that your mom would be doing the same thing. So it puts you in that soon to be mom role, which a lot of us as parents, when we get into practice, like we had Peyton before we were even in practice. Peyton
Yeah.
was 2 months old and we started our practice. Like we've
Wow.
went through a lot of this. Now there's going to be other people that are going to listen to this podcast, Dr. Steph, and say, well, I think Steph's full of crap because her husband was in an associateship. She was in an associateship. So obviously she must have earned some money and Kyle must have saved money too, which allowed her to open up her own practice. And basically Kyle supported her while she was opening your practice. I know that that's not the case. I know that you worked your butt off, but can you walk a little bit through what that was like having a husband in an associate role, yet you were starting and opening and you went through the same exact struggles as everybody else, correct?
Yeah, for sure. And for those of you that don't know, I to live in New Jersey is extremely expensive. So there's not like even at a good paying associateship, which 6 years ago is very different than the pay being offered now. But even in a great paying associateship, the cost of living in New Jersey is insane. Like we
Mhm.
were living in a studio basement in somebody's house when we first moved to Jersey because that's all we could afford. And that was $1,000 a month. When I was at Palmer, I lived in a 1 bedroom for $500 a month.
Mhm.
And so it was like a completely different world out here to realize how expensive things were. And quickly we were like, okay, yes, we have to get a little bit better at budgeting because if Kyle's paying all the personal bills, and I will say that he was phenomenal at saying, like, hey, I'll pay our home rent and I'll pay the utilities and groceries and whatever else I can help with. I'll make sure that we're taking care of at home. But there was definitely no money left over for him to pay the rent at the office
You
or
still got to pay for your office.
yeah, the EHR, all the things, the HR, the equipment, everything that comes with that, the tables. And so it really was like a grind in the beginning, and neither one of the things about Kyle and I, which I feel like a lot of people that we are close with, Skip, that we both know, both of us come from nothing, right? And so
Yeah.
unfortunately we're in a position to where our nobody in our family is chiropractors, but also they aren't business owners or they aren't entrepreneurs. And so they're not sitting on just money like, oh, hey, my children want to go open a business. Let's give them 30 grand to do it.
Right.
And so when you've been brought up knowing that like, hey, nothing's going to be handed to you, I think it creates a different type of grit inside of you and a little
Hunger.
bit different type of hustle.
Got to make it work. And
Yeah.
the people that what I found is that I grew up very similar, and my dad had 3 jobs when I was in high school. Like my mom had a job, but like there was like 4 jobs going on in my family at one time to feed 5 mouths. And I get what you're saying. And there's a type of hunger in an entrepreneur that just drives us. And either we make it work or we're going to figure out a way to make it work until we become successful. Now look at you now. I know your story. I see you now and I see how amazing you are and the doctors you lead and how you coach. What was the one thing, what were a couple things that we look at now is I know your target audience. Tell us your target, Mom, because I love it. What is your avatar? Like, what's your ideal client?
As far as the office goes?
Yeah.
So it's definitely a woman who has 1 child and she's pregnant with her second. She's looking to have a better birth the second time. And so she's looking to get care during pregnancy. And she's also looking for that support that she never really got with the first time she was pregnant, whether that support is about nutrition during pregnancy, breastfeeding, postpartum. She's looking for more of that holistic support the second time around. And so she's going to find that within our office. And she's also looking for advice on her toddler.
Nice.
And so she's able to help herself during this pregnancy, but also help her toddler in the meantime as well.
Now, I want to point out somebody right there, how granular Dr. Steph got with who she knows her avatar is. Plus, I've heard you say it's the bougie mom that has the really nice bag and drives It is
the bougie mom who also goes to Montessori and cares about the food she's putting in her children's mouths, you know?
Yep, because they do exist. And that's the thing is you can get really granular and know exactly who you want to work with and who you don't want to work with. Now, here's a question I wanted to come back to and I forgot to ask it, so forgive me. How did you get into the mom groups? How did you get into the La Leche League groups without having a baby? What did you do to bridge that line of communication, Dr. Steph?
And so some of the groups aren't really that welcoming if you don't have a baby, you know, because they're getting contacted by all these different providers all the time. And so it's kind of like, who do you know to get into some of the groups? And honestly, I remember when I first came out, I reached out to a La Leche League and they were like, what do you know that you want to tell us? And I was like, I'm a doctor offering my time to like come and support your members. And I was like, okay, well, here we are. We're in Jersey. Like I should have expected this. But no, so sometimes I got rejected, right? And it was like, okay, that's not the one for me now. But do you know what's funny? Like 5 years later, everybody from that La Leche like knows who I am.
Yeah,
like,
you built those relationships.
Consultant definitely refers to us. Exactly. It takes time to build relationships. And I think as new docs, sometimes we just want it to happen like right away. Like, but I'm so cool. Listen to everything I know and I want to help you. And there's definitely better ways to approach that. And so I just kind of approached it from like a patient's perspective, like not patients like who we see, but like calmness, willing to play the long game. Hey, I'm here for you. I want to support you the best that I can. And also, if certain people aren't open to it, I just found others who were. I think so often it's like, oh, this isn't going to work, or nobody wants to talk to me, or nobody wants to collaborate. But it's really just keep going back at bat and looking for those who do want to collaborate, because there's so many people in your community that you don't even know about yet.
So let's talk real quick about collaboration versus what can you do for me now? Because I feel that a lot of young docs go into things expecting things fast. They're like, you got to create this, or they'll look at our practice. We're 15 years into practice. We're a 7-figure practice. We're extremely busy. Like we see 70% children and they assume this all happened on Saturday. And, you know, and where did you find that your time was most well spent now, Dr. Steph, those first few years in practice to really build and nurture those relationships?
So it honestly was best spent getting to know my patients that I love taking care of. So like you said, the ideal clients, people that were coming in that I was like, oh, I can't wait till their next appointment. Like I just love taking care of them and their family. It was getting to know them. Like, what do you like in the community? What do you do for your family? Who are other providers that you like? Because I figured if they like them and I loved this patient so much, then I would get along with the provider too.
Heck yeah.
And a lot of in the beginning, you don't have a lot of marketing dollars. So you're not doing Facebook ads or Google ads or, you know, sponsoring the banners at like the local baseball game, but you do have the ability to develop that relational capital. And so just getting to know your ideal clients and taking care of them the best of your ability, I really feel like that paid tenfold for my practice.
I think you're 100% correct. And we've got these, right? And then one of these.
Yeah.
So it's like, make sure your patients feel heard. The ones that you love taking care of, make sure they know that you love taking care of them, and make sure that they know that you love taking care of people like them. Because there's a good chance, and we've talked about this, and with the principles that I've learned from Black Diamond Club, and now you're a coach there, which is absolutely phenomenal, by the way. If you need an amazing business coach and doctor and chiropractic coach, you need to talk to Dr. Steph. I fully endorse this woman. She's an absolutely amazing. And we can give you some links afterwards as to how do we get hold of her coaching wise, but nurturing those relationships is absolutely key. When you're, so in wrapping this up, we've got just a couple minutes left here, Dr. Steph. What do you think, being 6 years into practice, and I know a lot of docs would say, well, what is the one thing you would do differently? I don't think in my mind I would do anything differently.
Yeah, I don't think I would either.
I think all the lessons I've learned were there for a reason. And I was showing those lessons and showing that struggle, and the lesson kept repeating itself until I freaking learned what was going on and how to fix it. Right. Right. So what are your next big goals and aspirations, Dr. Steph, for the next couple of years here? Like, I expect to see massively huge things out of you. What are some of your big hairy ass goals?
Oh, that's a good question. You put me on the spot. As equally as I have a passion for chiropractic, I've found that compassion with coaching and, just empowering women, whether they're chiropractors or not, to go after their dreams. And, I get asked like, well, why did you get into coaching? And I think it's because every female chiropractor knows that they deserve to be successful and to be the mom that they want to be.
Yeah.
And for me, there was never any negotiating about which one I was going to be, because I just knew I was going to be both. And I could be this awesome businesswoman, but I could be this mom that's super involved with her child, that spends tons of time with him, and I don't have to sacrifice either my family or my business. And so I think that more women need to be empowered to do that. And so that's what my mission is heading into the next 5 years. If I can empower them through the office to be healthier so that they could show up as that mom who's doing it all, or if I can empower them, through consulting to show them like, hey, you can run your business and have that family life that you want to, that's my mission.
So tell me about one last thing here is, how do we get a hold of you if I want to coach with you, if I want to consult? I know you got Champagne CEOs, so I'm going to talk about that quick. And that's with you and your affiliate, with working with Dr. Lacey Book. Tell me about, how do I get a hold of you? I know you coach more than just women. But what do they do to get a hold of you, coach?
So you could go to my website, stephaniewigner.com. I have links for everything that you mentioned. So courses, consulting, Champagne CEOs, where we host our female retreats. I have a link to my office if you're local to Jersey and want to come shadow our practice, or you live out here, want to become a patient, whatever it may be, everything can be found on there.
Awesome. Say, Dr. Stephanie, I sincerely hope you know that I appreciate you coming by and talking to me for about 20, 25 minutes here. I think it's awesome. I think you're amazing. I knew that since our pediatric work we did down in Atlanta together, and I knew that you were fantastic. I know the work you do is amazing. Y'all get out there, talk to her, log on, find out who she is, get the information you need. And again, you have a super successful doc talking to you, 6 years out, 2 practices, husband owns a practice. Like, everybody can do this. So let's just go out there. Right? Everybody can. And Dr. Stephanie's proof of that. So now go out there and get it done. Take care, everybody. Bye.
Bye.